Welcome back to the next BrickBreaker game video here. So at this point, you should have a game that hopefully works like this. So nothing happens until I press a key, and I made my ball right now. It's going to bounce sideways, but a little bit upwards, and it bounces off the brick. The brick disappears, ball keeps going, and it stops when it hits the bottom. So hopefully you're at that point. The collision with the brick is a challenge, and I believe in the last video I left you with that challenge of trying to make the ball bounce off. If you're having trouble with that, you could leave it and just go on to the next part. Today we're going to make a paddle across the bottom that will slide back and forth, and hopefully we'll get the ball to bounce off that, and I'll help you with that in this video. Once you get that working, then you might be able to test the collision up here a little bit better. You might be able to see from different angles how your ball hits the brick. And also we'll see how to make the ball bounce off the paddle, and in seeing that, it might lead you to some hints as to how to get it to collide with the brick up at the top. Okay, so just as a one more hint here, in the ball class, this is the work I left you with, is to try and make a method called collides with. Okay, so this method accepts a brick as a parameter, and then again, this is within the ball class. So the object that's going to call this method is going to be a ball object. So from an outside class, we're going to have a ball that calls this method and see if it collides with a brick. And then if you go to the BrickBreaker game class, this is kind of our big class here, you'll see that in the paint method, we're drawing the screen, we're drawing the walls and the background, and then we're moving the ball. And then we're saying if brick 1, so right now we just have one brick, but if it's visible, we're going to draw it, and we're going to check the collision. Okay. So that's what we have right now. We're going to move on to drawing the paddle, and then if you're still having trouble with this, don't spend too much time on this. Just go on to the next part, and then you might be able to come back and figure that out once we do this video. All right, so the little paddle that moves across the bottom of the screen, we're going to make that a subclass of brick. So we already have a brick class that has an XY, has a width and a height. So a paddle has all that stuff too. So we might as well reuse some of that code. And then we're just going to add some other functionality to a paddle. For instance, it can move back and forth. Okay, so we'll build a new class called paddle and put it under here. Okay, so this is going to extend the brick class. Now, you might have some ideas for additional instance variables. I am going to make one extra. So this is in addition to all of the brick instance variables. We're going to have another one called speed. Okay, so the constructor is going to accept an X, Y, width, a height, a color. Okay, so these are the things that we use to create a brick. And then we're going to have one more thing called a speed. And do you remember how to pass all these 5 values up to the bricks constructor? We're going to use the word super. And I'm going to pass in X, Y, width, height, and color. And then I'm also going to assign speed. So this instance variable is going to be given the value of SP. And again, where are these actual values going to be coming from? They'll be coming from our BrickBreaker game class. So we'll create a paddle in the other class. Okay, and then we'll build one accessor. Simply return the speed and a mutator. Int SP. Okay, and we'll assign speed to SP. Okay, now, if you remember, the Brick class has an important method called hit. So we want to override that method. Here, let's just quickly go and check out that method again. So if I go into Brick, you'll see there is a method called hit. And so if the brick gets hit, then we're going to change visible to false. So let's close this. So we're going to override that method in our paddle class because we never want the paddle to be invisible. We always want it to be there. So we're going to override this. And we're just going to set visible to true. So this is an accessor method for the visibility variable. So again, this method is defined in the Brick class, so in the super class, in the parent class. So we are allowed to call it just like this because paddle is a subclass of Brick. So this is fine. So the paddle never disappears. Okay, so that's actually it. Unless you can think of some more variables that you want to add to the paddle, you may later in this project, you may instead of the paddle just being a solid colored rectangle, you might want to add a texture to it. So you could perhaps, instead of color, you could have this be an image variable, and then you can load up an image and have a kind of a texture instead of that. But don't worry about that right now. Let's get the game working, and then we can dress it up with all that fancy stuff later. Okay, so we'll change it back to a color. Oh, by the way, if you do change that to an image, then of course you would have to go back to the Brick class and change that from color to image as well. Okay, so we'll compile. Color doesn't work. Oh, yes. So whenever you use color, we need to import java.awt.star. Okay, the star means let's import all of the classes from the AWT folder. So there's actually a folder inside your JDK called Java, and then there's a subfolder called AWT, and then there's a ton of classes inside that, and we're just going to import all of them. We could have also just imported color. Out of habit, I always just put .star just in case we need anything else. All right, so now we have defined what a paddle is going to be. So now let's create a paddle. So we're not going to do that here. We're going to go into BrickBreaker game, and we'll go all the way to the top, and we're going to create an instance variable that is a paddle object. And might as well just call this paddle. Okay, and then in the constructor, I'm just going to push that down, and I'm going to create. So up here, we just created the reference, just the paddle reference, and now we're going to assign it to a new paddle object. Okay, so we want this to be near the bottom of the screen. So you might want to play around with these values. I found for my screen that an X value, well, I suppose the X value doesn't matter as long as it's between 0 and 500 or whatever the width of your screen is. And then I'm going to put 470 as the Y value, so kind of close to 500, close to the bottom. And then I made a width of 120 and a height of 10. Again, go ahead and change that. You can make that different if you'd like. And then color dot, let's make it red. And then the last instance variable is a special one just for paddles, and that's the speed. So this is going to be the amount of pixels that the paddle moves sideways every time I click the arrow keys. So we're going to start it off as 30. That might be too fast, might be too slow, but we'll give that a try. Okay, so now we're going to go to key pressed. All right, and so far we only have one thing in here. So this basically is a little switch, a little Boolean variable that starts the game. So as soon as I press a key, play is true, and then that starts the ball moving. So I am going to add. So we want to make the left and right keys working. So we're going to use this key event object E, and we're going to say if e.getKeyCode is equal to right, and this is how you do this here. So this is the right key. So I know this is a lot of code here, but we're basically saying if we press the right key at any time during our applet, then what I'm going to do, okay, I just thought of something. So paddle is the name of our paddle. I'm going to make another method inside the paddle class called move right. Okay, so we have to go back. We have to make a method called move right. And if, or else if, e.getKeyCode is equal to key event dot vk left. So if I press the left key, then I'm going to call the method move left. Okay, so we're going to make these methods move right and move left as part of the paddle class. So right now, if you compile, this won't work. It'll say, I don't know what these methods are. So we're going to go back to the paddle class, and let's add methods move left and move right. We'll do move right first. Okay, so no parameters coming in. So what this is going to do is just move your paddle to the right. How many pixels? Speed pixels. So whatever this speed value is, we created ours as 30. So it's going to add basically 30 pixels to our X value. That's it. Okay, so how would I do that here? Could I just say X equals X plus speed? That's kind of what we want to do. We want to change our paddle's X to X plus speed, but this won't work because even though paddle is a subclass, we can't directly access X. So we're going to have to use the mutator method, set X to get X plus speed. Okay, so we're using the accessor method to get the current value of X, and then we're using the mutator method to change X to that value. Okay, so then we'll make one for move left. And the only thing we're going to change here is a minus. So we're going to subtract our speed from our X value. Okay, so this should compile. And our BrickBreaker game should compile. Yeah, okay. And so now there's only one more thing left to do before we can test this, is to go up to our paint method. So this is the all-important method that draws everything. So it draws our walls and our background. It causes the ball to move. It draws our brick. if in fact it hasn't been hit yet and it's still visible. And it also checks to see if our ball collides with the brick. Okay, but we're going to do something else now. So underneath, we're going to take our paddle. Again, this is the name of the variable. This is our paddle object called paddle. And we're going to say paddle.draw. Now, this is not defined in our paddle class. We didn't make a method called draw in our paddle class, but it is defined in the superclass in brick. So we're going to reuse that code. So we're going to, since paddle is a brick, we can call the draw method on that. Okay. And now here's the cool thing. We can say ball dot collides with paddle. And this will check the ball's collision with the paddle. And again, this method is defined in the ball class. And if you remember, the collides with method accepts a brick as a parameter. But since a paddle is a brick, we can pass this to our collides with method, just like we did up here. Okay, so let's just have a look and see what happens here. So if I compile, I'm okay. And now I'm going to run the main. Okay, so I'm going to move left and right, and you can see my paddle is moving. Okay, let's see if the collision works. Oh, okay, it looked like it did work. Oh, one other thing, the paddle goes off the screen, you can see. Interesting. Okay, so we want the paddle to stop. We don't want it to go off the screen. But it looked like it was working. I just played the game poorly. Let's try it one more time here. It's probably going to end up over here. Okay, looked okay. Look, it bounced right in the corner. Again, if the starting dx and dy of the ball is the same every time, then you can predict the movement of the ball. So what you could do is randomize dx and dy at the beginning of each run, just so it's not the exact same. I missed it. I'm bad at my own game. Okay, but it should be working at this point. So I'm going to leave this as an exercise for you to try and get it so the paddle can't go off the screen. I'll let you try and figure out where you're going to put that code. And then, of course, you still need to finish that collides with method. So spend a bit more time on the collides with, and then we're basically almost done the game. We just have to create a few more bricks, and then dress it up a bit. Maybe make a bigger screen. Maybe add some images, some sounds, things like that. Okay, so we'll see you in the next video.